Most people think fear comes from something chasing you. Footsteps in the dark, a knock at the door, a voice calling your name when nobody should be there. But sometimes, the most unsettling thing isn't movement. It's stillness, a quiet street, a normal house, a window glowing at 2 in the morning, and someone standing outside, not moving, not leaving, just standing there. At first, you tell yourself it's nothing. Maybe a neighbor, maybe someone lost, maybe you're too tired to think clearly. But then you look again, and they're still there. Same position, same posture, watching. That's when the questions begin. How long have they been standing there? Why haven't they moved? And what are they waiting for? Tonight, you're going to hear true horror stories from people who looked outside their windows in the middle of the night and saw someone standing there, watching the house, waiting in the dark. Sometimes for hours, sometimes until sunrise. And in some of these stories, the person outside was never identified. No explanation, no clear face, no answers. Just a figure standing in the darkness, long enough to make people wish they had never looked outside at all. And after tonight, you may never feel comfortable looking through your window again. The first story happened to a woman who thought the notification on her phone was just a camera error, until she looked outside. 3 months ago, a woman named Erica sent this story to me through email. At first, I almost ignored it. There were no dramatic headlines, no wild claims, no talk about ghosts or creatures hiding in the woods. Just one sentence. I think someone stood outside my house all night. And after reading what happened, I understood why she still keeps every light in her house on before going to sleep. According to Erica, it started at exactly 2:13 in the morning. She remembers the time clearly because the notification sound from her security camera woke her up. Outside her bedroom window, rain was falling hard enough to blur the streetlights. The neighborhood looked empty. No cars moving, no people outside. Just the sound of rain hitting the roof and gutters. Erica lived alone in a small suburban neighborhood at the edge of town. Quiet place, the kind of street where people usually knew each other. Nothing ever happened there, which is why she almost ignored the notification. At first, she thought maybe an animal walked past the camera, or maybe the rain triggered the motion sensor again. She reached for her phone without even sitting up. Half asleep, the notification read, "Motion detected, front yard." She opened the live camera feed and immediately froze. There was someone standing near her mailbox. Completely still. The camera quality wasn't perfect because of the rain, but she could still make out the shape clearly. Tall, dark hoodie, head lowered slightly, standing at the edge of her yard, not walking, not pacing, just standing there in the rain. Erica said her first reaction wasn't fear, it was confusion. Because who stands outside in weather like that at 2 in the morning? She kept staring at the screen, waiting for movement. Maybe they would leave. Maybe they were drunk. Maybe they were lost. But the person didn't move at all, not even slightly. A full minute passed. Then another. Still nothing. Erica finally got out of bed and walked carefully toward the living room window. She didn't turn any lights on. She moved the curtain just enough to peek outside, and there he was, exactly where the camera showed him. Standing beside the mailbox, rain pouring over his hood, completely motionless. She stepped back from the window immediately. Something about seeing him with her own eyes changed the feeling completely. The camera feed had felt distant, but seeing an actual person outside her home in the middle of the night made the silence inside the house feel different. He wasn't across the street. He wasn't far away. He was standing directly in front of her property, watching the house. Erica locked the living room window even though it was already locked. Then she checked the front door twice. By the time she looked back at the camera feed, the figure still hadn't moved. 2:27 a.m., still standing there. The rain became heavier. Wind pushed tree branches against nearby fences. But the figure remained perfectly still. Erica considered calling the police. But what would she even say? There's a man standing outside. He hadn't threatened her. He hadn't tried breaking in. He was just standing there. So instead, she decided to wait a little longer. That decision would later become the part she regretted most. Around 2:40, she noticed something strange. The figure had moved. Not closer, not farther away, but the position of his head was different. Before, he had been facing slightly downward. Now, he appeared to be looking directly at the house, at her window. Erica backed away from the curtain again. Her stomach dropped instantly, because she suddenly realized something she hadn't thought about before. If she could see him, then he could probably see her too. She stopped looking outside after that. Instead, she sat on the couch, holding her phone, watching the security feed from a distance. Every few minutes she checked again, and every time, he was still there. 3:02 a.m., still standing there. 3:11 a.m., still there. At one point, a police car slowly drove down the street. Its headlights swept across the neighborhood. Erica felt immediate relief. Finally, someone would notice him. The police cruiser slowed slightly near her house. The headlights passed directly over the figure. And then, the car kept driving. No stop, no questions, nothing. Erica couldn't believe it. She replayed the moment on the security footage twice, just to make sure she wasn't imagining things. The officers had clearly seen him, but they drove away anyway. That's when fear really settled in, because suddenly the situation felt worse. If the police ignored him, then maybe there was something about him they didn't want to deal with either. At 3:18, her porch light flickered once, then again, then completely shut off for 3 seconds. During those 3 seconds, the figure disappeared into darkness. Erica said those few moments felt longer than anything she had ever experienced, because she knew he was still out there somewhere. She just couldn't see him anymore. Then the porch light came back on, and there he was again. Same position, facing the house. A few minutes later, her phone vibrated with a text message. It was from her neighbor across the street. The message said, "Do you know that guy outside?" Erica immediately typed back, "No. Can you still see him?" But the neighbor didn't respond. Not right away. 3 full minutes passed before another message finally appeared. "I can't see him anymore." Erica's heart started pounding. She rushed back toward the window and looked outside again. The mailbox was empty. The figure was gone. She scanned the yard desperately. Nothing. Street empty. Rain still falling. No movement anywhere. But then, another text arrived. "Wait, I think he moved closer to your house." Erica pulled the curtain wider without thinking, and nearly screamed. The figure was no longer near the mailbox. He was standing at the edge of her driveway now, much closer. Close enough that she could finally see his face clearly. Except she couldn't. The hood covered almost everything. All she could see was darkness underneath it. No eyes, no expression. Just the shape of someone staring directly toward her window. Erica stumbled backward and immediately called the police. This time, she didn't care if she sounded paranoid. But while she was speaking to dispatch, the security camera feed suddenly glitched. Static filled the screen. The image distorted for several seconds. And when it returned, the driveway was empty. Police arrived 12 minutes later. They searched around the property with flashlights. Nothing. No person nearby. No footprints in the front yard. No damaged windows. One officer even told her it was probably just someone passing through. After standing outside her house for almost 2 hours. Eventually, the officers left. By then, the sky was beginning to brighten slightly. The rain had finally stopped. Erica stayed awake until sunrise, and around 6:10 that morning, she decided to check outside herself. She opened the front door carefully. Cold air drifted inside. The yard looked normal again, empty, quiet. But as she stepped off the porch, she noticed something near the side of the house. Footprints. Dark, muddy footprints leading away from the backyard fence, straight toward the rear entrance of her home. Erica followed them slowly, one after another, each print wet and fresh from the rain, and they ended directly outside her back door. The same back door she realized she had forgotten to lock that night, Erica said. She nearly threw up when she noticed it. But the worst part didn't happen until later. Around noon, she decided to review all the camera footage again before deleting it. She watched every recording carefully. The mailbox, the driveway, the police car, everything. Then she noticed a corrupted video file timestamped 3:41 a.m., a time she hadn't checked before. She opened it, expecting more static. Instead, the footage showed her kitchen, recorded from the indoor security camera she forgot she even owned. At first, the kitchen looked empty, dark, silent. Then the camera adjusted slightly to the low light, and standing near the sink, completely motionless, was the same hooded figure. Inside her house, police searched the property twice. They never found anyone. No fingerprints, no damaged locks, nothing missing from the house. But Erica stopped sleeping near windows after that night, because once you realize someone has been watching your home for hours, every sound starts to feel different. Every shadow feels closer. And sometimes, people believe they're safe once the stranger disappears. But sometimes, that's when the real horror begins. The next story happened to a teenager staying at his grandmother's house during summer break. And according to him, the man under the streetlight appeared every single night at the exact same time. The second story came from a man named Tyler. What happened to him took place when he was 16 years old. Every summer, his parents would send him to stay with his grandmother for a few weeks. She lived alone in an old neighborhood on the edge of a small town. The houses were older, the streets were narrower, and after midnight, the entire area seemed to go silent. No traffic, no music, no people walking outside. Just the occasional sound of wind brushing through the trees. Tyler's grandmother had lived there for nearly 40 years. Nothing unusual had ever happened. At least, that was what she always said. The first night passed without incident. The second night was different. Tyler couldn't sleep. An old analog clock sat on a shelf across from his bed. Every second echoed through the room. Tick, tick, tick. At around 2:30 in the morning, he got up and walked toward the window. That was when he noticed someone standing beneath the streetlight across the road. At first, it didn't seem strange. The neighborhood wasn't completely isolated. Maybe it was a neighbor, maybe someone waiting for a ride. But something felt unusual. The man wasn't moving, not pacing, not checking a phone, not looking around, just standing there. Tyler watched for nearly a minute. The man never changed position. Eventually, he went back to bed. The next morning, he forgot about it until the following night. At almost the exact same time, the man was there again. Same streetlight, same posture, same location, standing perfectly still. This time, Tyler watched longer, 5 minutes, then 10. Nothing changed. The man remained exactly where he was. By the third night, Tyler started waiting for him, and once again, he appeared. Same time, same place, standing beneath the yellow glow of the streetlight. That's when Tyler noticed something he hadn't noticed before. The man looked closer, not much closer, just enough to make him question his memory. He tried convincing himself he was imagining it. Maybe he had simply remembered the distance incorrectly. But the feeling stayed with him. The next morning, he mentioned it to his grandmother. She became quiet. For a few seconds, she didn't say anything. Then she asked him a question. "How long did you watch him?" Tyler laughed. He thought she was joking. But she wasn't smiling. She just stood there waiting for an answer. When he told her, she looked away. And then she said something he still remembers. "Don't look at him too long." That was it. No explanation. No reason. Just those 6 words. The conversation ended there. That night, Tyler stayed awake. The clock continued its steady rhythm. Tick, tick, tick. At 2:31 a.m., he looked outside. The man was there, and this time, he was definitely closer. Not across the street anymore. Now he stood near the sidewalk directly opposite the house. Tyler felt his stomach tighten. Because he finally understood something. The man wasn't wandering around. He wasn't choosing random places. Every night, he was moving closer, slowly, one night at a time. The family dog seemed to notice it too. Normally, the dog loved going outside. But after dark, it refused. Whenever anyone opened the front door at night, the dog would stop and stare toward the streetlight. Then back away, as if something outside frightened it. A few nights later, the power went out, without warning. The entire neighborhood disappeared into darkness. Streetlights, house lights, everything. Gone. The silence felt different immediately, heavier. The old clock stopped ticking. The refrigerator stopped humming. The entire house seemed frozen. Tyler rushed to the window. The streetlight was dead. Nothing but darkness outside. And for the first time, he couldn't see where the man should have been. Several long seconds passed. Then the electricity returned. Lights flickered back to life. The streetlight illuminated the road again. And there he was, closer than ever before. Standing near the front gate, Tyler bought a digital camcorder from a thrift store. He wanted proof. That night, he placed it against the upstairs bedroom window, pointing directly toward the streetlight. Then he waited. At exactly 2:30 a.m., the figure appeared again, motionless, silent, watching. The recording continued for nearly an hour. Nothing happened, no movement, no change. Eventually, Tyler went to sleep. The following afternoon, he reviewed the footage. For most of the recording, everything looked normal. Then he reached the final few minutes, and suddenly his blood ran cold. The camera had captured something he hadn't noticed. The figure wasn't facing the street. It wasn't facing the house. It wasn't facing the front yard. The man was looking directly at the upstairs bedroom window, directly at Tyler's room. The entire time, not once did his head turn. Not once did his posture change. It was as though he had been staring at that single window all night. Tyler never told his grandmother what he found. But she seemed to know something was wrong. Because later that evening, she asked him another question. A question that made no sense at the time. "Did you record him?" Tyler asked how she knew. She never answered. That night became the last night. At 2:30 a.m., the man appeared beneath the streetlight again, closer than he had ever been. Tyler watched from the window, waiting. Then something happened. The streetlight flickered once, twice, 3 times, and suddenly burned out completely. Darkness swallowed the road. The figure disappeared instantly. No silhouette, no movement, nothing, just darkness. Tyler stayed at the window for nearly 20 minutes. The man never returned. When morning arrived, he finally felt relieved. Until he stepped outside. The ground was still wet from overnight rain, and surrounding the entire house was a trail of footprints. They circled the property, one complete loop, then another, as though someone had spent hours walking around the house in the darkness, looking inside every window, searching every corner, trying every angle. The footprints stopped directly beneath Tyler's bedroom window, and there they simply ended. No footprints leading away, No trail back toward the road, just an empty patch of wet grass, as if whoever had been there had vanished. If you're watching this alone right now, maybe don't look outside. The next story is the one that made me stop checking my own security cameras after midnight. The third story came from a married couple living in a quiet neighborhood outside Portland. For years, nothing unusual ever happened around their property. No break-ins, no trespassers, no strange incidents. That changed after they began hearing noises outside at night. It started with small things. A sound near the fence, a faint knock somewhere in the backyard, footsteps that seemed too heavy to belong to an animal. The noises never lasted long, and whenever they looked outside, they found nothing. At first, they ignored it. But after several weeks, the husband decided to install security cameras around the house. One facing the driveway, one covering the backyard, and another pointed toward the rear entrance. The first few nights were uneventful. Then, on a Thursday morning, the wife noticed something unusual while reviewing the footage. At 2:17 a.m., someone was standing in the backyard. The figure appeared near the fence, tall, motionless, face impossible to see. The husband assumed it was a prank, probably someone wandering through neighboring properties. But when they checked the next frame, the figure had moved. Not walking, not turning, just standing somewhere else, several feet closer. The strange part was this. There was no footage showing him move. One frame showed him near the fence. The next frame showed him farther forward. Nothing in between. No movement, no transition. Just a different position. The husband laughed it off. The camera must have skipped frames. That explanation sounded reasonable, until the following night. The figure returned. Same time, same backyard, same posture. And once again, every frame showed him standing in a different location. Closer, 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 but never moving. The wife became obsessed with checking the footage every morning before work, every evening before bed, looking for some explanation, some detail they had missed. But there wasn't one. No matter how many times she watched the recordings, the camera never captured a single step, never a turn of the head, never a shift in posture, only still images, one position, then another, as though someone were placing him around the yard between frames. After a week, she stopped sleeping well. Every small noise woke her up. Every shadow outside the window pulled her attention. The husband continued insisting it was a prank, a strange one, but still a prank. He even joked about it, at least in the beginning. Then the timestamps started changing. That was when things became harder to explain. One recording showed 2:17 a.m. The next frame read 2:04 a.m., then 2:31 a.m., then 1:58 a.m. The timestamps jumped backward and forward without any pattern. The cameras themselves showed no errors. The recordings played normally. Only the time displayed on screen seemed wrong. The couple contacted the camera manufacturer. The company checked the system remotely. According to them, nothing was malfunctioning. Everything appeared normal. The wife didn't believe them, because every night the figure appeared, and every night he seemed closer. By the second week, he was standing near the center of the yard. By the third week, he was near the patio. The husband finally stopped calling it a prank, not because he believed anything supernatural was happening, but because nobody could explain how someone was entering the property night after night without leaving a trace. No footprints, no damage to fences, no signs of entry, nothing. Then came the frame that changed everything. The wife discovered it on a Sunday morning. She had been reviewing footage from around 3 a.m., frame by frame, slowly, carefully, and then she found it. A single image. One frame, less than a second long. The figure stood inches from the back door, close enough that his reflection appeared in the glass. The husband stared at the screen for nearly a minute. Neither of them spoke, because until that moment, the figure had always remained somewhere in the yard. Now he had reached the house. The husband immediately checked the door. Locked. No signs of tampering. Nothing unusual. But the feeling inside the home changed after that. The backyard no longer felt separate. The distance was gone. The figure had reached them. That night, neither of them slept. They sat together in the living room, watching the live camera feed. Hours passed. Nothing happened. The backyard remained empty. Midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, still nothing. Then at exactly 2:17 a.m., the camera flickered. For less than a second, the husband leaned forward. The wife grabbed his arm. The figure was back, standing directly outside the rear entrance. Motionless, watching, the husband rushed toward the back door. He switched on every exterior light. The yard flooded with brightness. Nothing. No one outside. The cameras still showed the figure, but the yard itself was empty. Eventually, the feed froze completely. When it returned, the figure was gone. For the first time in weeks, the cameras showed nothing. The couple felt relieved. Maybe it was finally over. Maybe whatever had caused the recordings had stopped. Maybe they would finally sleep again. The following morning, they reviewed the footage one last time. Every camera showed an empty backyard, empty patio, empty fence line, no figure, nothing unusual. Then the wife paused the recording. There was something visible in the kitchen window. A reflection. At first it looked like a shadow. Then she zoomed in and immediately covered her mouth. Standing behind the camera, inside the house, was the same figure. Perfectly still, visible only in the reflection. Watching the kitchen from somewhere within the darkness of their home. The outdoor camera never captured him entering, never captured him moving. And according to the footage, he had never been in the backyard at all. Only the reflection proved he was there. Sometimes fear isn't what you see. It's realizing something has been inside the house the entire time. The next story begins with a porch light, a father, and a little girl who noticed something nobody else wanted to see. The fourth story came from a single father named David. He lived with his 7-year-old daughter in a quiet neighborhood outside a small city. The house wasn't old. Nothing about it stood out. The kind of place people moved to because it felt safe. For nearly 2 years, everything was normal. Then the motion lights started turning on. At first, it happened once every few nights. The light above the front porch would suddenly activate. David would check outside. Nothing. No person. No animal. No movement. Just an empty yard. He assumed it was a technical problem. Maybe insects. Maybe wind moving a branch. The explanation seemed reasonable. Until it started happening every night. Always after midnight. Always the same light. Always with nothing visible outside. Eventually, it became routine. The light would come on. David would look outside, and the yard would be empty. For weeks, nothing changed. Then one night, something finally appeared. It was just after 1:00 a.m. The porch light activated again. David sighed and walked toward the front window. He pulled the curtain aside and immediately froze. Someone was standing at the edge of his property, far enough away to remain partly hidden by darkness, close enough to recognize it was a person. The figure wore a dark hood. The face couldn't be seen. The posture was completely still. David stared for several seconds, waiting for movement. None came. The figure remained exactly where it was, watching the house. David checked again a few minutes later. The figure hadn't moved. Still standing. Still facing the property. Still silent. The next night, it returned. Same location, same posture. The night after that, it appeared again, always standing at the very edge of the property, never approaching. never leaving while he watched. David began losing patience. Part of him believed someone was playing games. Another part wasn't so sure. One night he decided to test something. The figure had appeared again, standing exactly where it always stood. David reached towards switch and turned off the porch light. Darkness swallowed the front yard. He waited, counted slowly to 10, then switched the light back on. The figure was closer. Not much closer, just enough that the change was obvious. David's hand immediately tightened around the switch. His heart began racing. He knew exactly where the figure had been moments earlier. There was no mistake. The distance had changed, yet he had never seen it move. The following night, he repeated the test. The figure appeared, motionless. Watching, David turned the porch light off. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15. When the light returned, the figure stood closer than before, now near the sidewalk leading toward the house. That was the last time David performed the test, because something happened the next morning that changed everything. His daughter was eating breakfast when she casually asked a question so unexpected that David nearly dropped his coffee. She looked toward the front window and said, "Why does that man keep smiling at my window?" The room became silent. David slowly turned toward her. His daughter continued eating as if she had said nothing unusual. He asked what she meant. She shrugged and pointed toward the second floor, my bedroom window. David felt cold because he had never told her about the figure, not once. He asked when she had seen him. She thought for a moment, then answered, "Almost every night." David tried keeping his voice calm. "What does he do?" Her response stayed with him for years. "He just stands there and smiles." David couldn't remember what happened next, only that he immediately went upstairs. The bedroom overlooked the front yard. From that angle, someone standing outside would have a clear view into the room. That night, David stayed awake. Hours passed. The house remained quiet. Then shortly after 1 a.m., the motion light activated again. The figure was back, standing closer than ever before. David didn't hesitate. He grabbed a flashlight, unlocked the front door, and ran outside. The cold air hit him immediately. His flashlight swept across the yard. Nothing. No figure, no movement, no sound. The property was empty. He searched around the house, behind bushes, near the driveway, around neighboring yards. Nothing. Then he looked up. His daughter's bedroom window reflected the moonlight. And that's when he noticed something. Fingerprints, several of them, pressed against the outside of the glass. Far too high to belong to a child, fresh enough to catch the light. David stood there, staring, trying to understand how someone could have reached that window, trying to understand how long they had been there, and wondering why he had never noticed before. The police were called. They examined the window, took photographs, asked questions, but no useful answers ever came. Life slowly returned to normal. The motion light stopped activating. Weeks passed, then months. The figure never returned. At least, that's what David believed. Until one morning, he reviewed footage from an indoor security camera. The timestamp read 4:12 a.m. The camera overlooked a hallway connecting the bedrooms. The motion sensor had activated during the night. David expected to see one of them walking through the house. Instead, the footage showed an empty hallway. Silent. Still. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then, the motion sensor triggered again. The camera shifted slightly, as if it had detected movement, but there was nobody there. And yet, the system continued tracking something moving down the hallway, toward his daughter's room. The final story came from someone who never revealed their name. No location, no photographs, no social media accounts, nothing that could identify them. Only a detailed account of what happened over 4 nights. and one request. They asked that if the story was ever shared, their name should never be mentioned. According to the email, they lived alone. Small house, quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where nothing happened after midnight. For years, their routine never changed. Lock the doors, turn off the lights, go to bed, wake up for work. Normal, predictable, until the knocking started. The first night happened at exactly 3:03 a.m. The sound woke them instantly. 3 soft knocks, not loud, not aggressive, just enough to pull them from sleep. Knock, knock, knock. The house became silent again. The sender checked the clock. 3:03 a.m. After waiting several minutes, they looked through the front window. Nothing. The street was empty. No cars, no people, no movement. Eventually, they returned to bed. The next morning, they convinced themselves it was nothing. Maybe a branch, maybe part of the house settling, maybe someone at the wrong address. The second night, the knocking returned, again, at 3:03 a.m. This time it was louder, much louder. 3 heavy impacts against the front door. Knock, knock, knock. The sound echoed through the hallway. The sender sat upright in bed, waiting, listening. The knocking stopped, but sleep never returned. The next morning, they checked outside. Nothing. No footprints, no packages, no signs anyone had been there. The third night changed everything. At exactly 3:03 a.m., the knocking returned. Only this time, it wasn't the only sound. A voice followed it, a whisper, soft, calm, close enough to hear clearly. "I know you're awake." The sender stopped breathing. Every muscle locked in place, because the voice sounded like it was standing directly outside the front door. Not yelling, not threatening, simply stating a fact. "I know you're awake." Several minutes passed, no further sounds came, but the sender never left the bedroom. When daylight arrived, they purchased a security camera. That night, they installed it above the front door. If someone was there, the camera would finally prove it. At least that was the plan. 3:03 a.m. arrived. Nothing happened. No knocking, no whisper. The sender felt relieved. Then every light inside the house went out. Instantly, the entire home fell into darkness. The television shut off. The hallway light disappeared. The digital clock beside the bed went black. Only the phone remained illuminated. For a moment, then the battery indicator dropped. 70%, 50%, 30%, 10%, 5%. Dead in less than a minute. The sender stared at the dark screen in disbelief. Then came the knocking. Knock, 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 knock. The sound seemed louder than ever. Not desperate, not angry. Patient, as though whoever stood outside already knew they would eventually answer. The sender stayed in bed, motionless, listening. Then something else happened. The bedroom door began opening, slowly. The hinges produced a long, creaking sound. The gap widened inch by inch. Darkness filled the hallway beyond. No footsteps, no voice. Just the door opening by itself. The sender pulled the blanket tighter. Watching, waiting. The door stopped moving halfway open. Several seconds passed. Then the knocking returned. Knock, knock, knock. Still exactly 3 knocks. Always 3. Always at 3:03. The sender didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, they checked the security footage. The recording ended at 3:02 a.m. 1 second before the knocking began. The camera never captured anything. No visitor, no movement, nothing. The following evening, the sender considered leaving the house, driving somewhere else, staying with friends, anywhere. But curiosity won. They needed to know who was outside, needed to know what wanted their attention so badly. So they stayed and waited. 3:03 a.m. arrived. The knocking came immediately. 3 sharp impacts, followed by silence. Then the whisper, "I know you're awake." The sender stood up, heart pounding. Every instinct told them to stay away from the door. Instead, they walked toward it. The hallway seemed longer than usual. Darker, colder. The knocking stopped. The house became completely silent. The sender reached the front door, placed one hand against the wood, and leaned toward the peephole. At first, they couldn't understand what they were seeing. Their mind refused to process it, because standing outside was themselves. Same face, same clothes, same height, same hair, everything identical. The figure stood perfectly still beneath the porch light, smiling. Not a normal smile, not happiness, not excitement, just a wide expression that never changed. The sender jumped backward immediately. Their heart nearly stopped. They looked again. The porch was empty. Nothing outside. No person. No movement. No explanation. The rest of the night passed in silence. No more knocking. No more whispers. Nothing. When morning arrived, the sender checked the security system one final time. Most of the recordings were unusable, corrupted, missing, frozen. But one file remained intact. Timestamp, 3:03 a.m. The sender expected to finally see whoever had been outside. Instead, the footage showed the front door. Nothing more. The porch remained empty. The street remained empty. No visitor ever appeared. Then, after several seconds, the door slowly opened. Not from outside, from inside. The recording clearly showed the handle turning, the door swinging outward, and someone stepping onto the porch. The camera angle never captured their face, only a silhouette, standing there, looking into the darkness, waiting. The file ended moments later. The sender swore they never opened the door, swore they never left the hallway, swore they never stepped outside. But according to the footage, someone did. And the final frame contained one detail that made them abandon the house less than a week later. The silhouette standing on the porch was smiling. Maybe every story you've heard tonight has an explanation. Maybe every figure outside those homes was real. Maybe every shadow belonged to someone ordinary. Or maybe some doors should never be opened. Some windows should never be checked. And sometimes, when something stands outside long enough, it's not trying to get in. It's waiting for you to come out. If you made it to the end tonight, comment the word "watching," so I know you made it all the way through these stories. And while you're typing it, tell me something. Have you ever looked outside late at night and seen something you couldn't explain? If you have, I'd like to hear about it. Some of the stories featured on this channel come directly from viewers. And some of the most unsettling ones begin with a single moment that seemed completely ordinary, until it wasn't. And if you enjoy horror stories that feel a little too real, subscribe. Because next time, the story might begin with a sound outside your window, a knock at your door, or a figure standing somewhere in the darkness, waiting to be noticed. Until next time, keep the lights on.